If this were your first season doing fantasy football and you looked at average draft positions and you saw the Eagles' top two wide receivers, you might draw this conclusion. I know I would if this were my first time playing. You'd see A.J. Brown as the overall 17th ranked fantasy player, the WR9, deservedly, by the way. And you would also see Devonta Smith as the overall 54, the WR25, the 25th ranked wide receiver. And the conclusion that I would draw, if I didn't know any better, would be, oh, okay, AJ Brown is the man on that team. Like he's the alpha. And Devonta Smith is that guy who, he's maybe a weekly starter, in 12 team leagues. But he'll have some bad games and overall he'll be fine. It's kind of like if WR25, if you're looking to draft someone, you're saying, all right, I'm hoping two or three really good games. I'm hoping maybe eight or nine, like solid good games. And there's going to be some that just, he gets 6, 8, 9 points and it's like you just deal with it. That's not Devonta Smith though. Like his average draft position, his market value doesn't in any way connect with his actual production. His ADP assumes that he's going to miss a bunch of games or he's going to suddenly be a bad football player relative to what he has been. What I mean by that is last year, he was the WR17 in points per game. He was right behind Terry McLaurin, one spot behind McLaurin. He was 4 spots behind A.J. Brown. So this is not a guy who is way off as the number 2. It's more of a 1A, 1B situation. Look, a few years ago, both these guys were top 10 fantasy wide receivers. Even in a low passing attack offense like the Eagles, led by Jalen Hurts, you still had these two guys as top 10. It has happened before. And because of, everyone's in their prime or pre-prime at this stage, Brown certainly in his prime, Smith maybe in pre-prime, maybe prime, Hurts maybe prime, maybe pre-prime. There's no way you can say, oh, well, that was an anomaly. In reality, those two guys can't be top 10 receivers again. It would be bunk. Like, of course it's possible. Dallas Goedert is now 30 years old. That is on the other end of prime. He is starting that march towards post prime. And in addition to that, the Eagles still do not have, as they have not for years, a strong number 3 wide receiver. Great news for fantasy managers. Obviously fine news for the Eagles. They won the Super Bowl, so they didn't need it, but they have Jahan Dotson, who was their number 3 last year, had like 300 yards. Sort of a reclamation project, former first round pick. And then they picked up Terrace Marshall, Carolina's second round pick from 2-3 years ago. Another reclamation project. And the Eagles are probably hoping to strike gold with one of them. Dotson has the inside track for obvious reasons to start as the number 3 this season, but who knows what'll happen. Still, this is, as on paper, based on what we've seen of those guys over their careers, a very, very top-heavy offense, at least passing attack, that is even more top-heavy entering this season with Goddard now 30 years old, and in his prime Brown and a pre-primer in his prime Smith. It might surprise you last year, actually, Smith and Brown, they both played 13 games. Smith had one more reception than Brown. Smith had one more touchdown than Brown. Smith was on pace for 17-game season of around 80 catches for about 1,100 yards and about 10 scores. If you were to look at those stats and then look at his ADP at 25, I would think almost everyone looking at that would say, oh, wait a second. No, he's top 20 easily. Like that's 80 catches for 1,100 yards and 10 scores easily. You add to that the prospect that, like Brown, Smith is a former early first round draft pick, amazing out of college, expected to play at a very high level. And the only reason that we don't talk about Smith with the same breath as Brown is because Smith happened to join one of the few teams that had a clear alpha that Smith it would take probably a few years for Smith to get to that level, to match what Brown can do with, 100 catches, 1,400 yards, 11 scores. Smith can't really do that in this offense playing behind an in his prime Brown. Put Smith on 20 other teams, possibly more, and he's the number one receiver, in my opinion. And in fact, I mentioned McLaurin. McLaurin has a better ADP, even though those two were neck and neck in terms of points per game. McLaurin somehow is ranked much better. And somehow I say that with the understanding that there is not just a somehow, there is a rationale. The rationale is McLaurin is the number one receiver in Washington. It is similarly low pass volume offense. And Smith is the number two. But I don't really see it that way, because if I see it as a 1A, 1B situation, if I see it the way that it has been over most of the last 3 years, which is that on a per game basis, Smith has done very well for himself. He can be a top 10 again. Then there is no way to look at this and say, yeah, I'll just wait and draft him as the 25th best pick. I would rather have Smith than McLaurin. So I would rather draft Smith. If I'm drafted and somebody takes McLaurin, and I take Smith right after that, I'm about 80% confident that if both of those guys are healthy all season, that Smith's going to have a better year. That's how confident I am in Smith's ability to rise to that next level at age 26. And the 80, 1100, 10 receiving line clip that he was on track for last season, could easily go to 85, 1200, 11. And suddenly, if you're talking about an ascending talent, and I think Smith is ascending, that puts him easily in the top 12 picture. And it doesn't even matter what Brown does, because again, I want to make this really, really clear. These two guys have both been top 10 receivers, fantasy receivers before. It has happened before. It can happen again. Last thing I'll say on this front, and this is just, people ask me sometimes, how do you spot a bargain? This is the example. There's dozens of examples, but I want you to bookmark this, go back and, 5 months from now, listen to this podcast. And if I am wrong, if Smith plays 16, 17 games and he's the 25th best receiver, call me out. Call me out publicly. I'm fine with that. But this is, to me, one of those examples of how do you spot a bargain when the market is perceiving someone's value based not on what they've done and not even what they are likely to do, but on stats based on a shortened season that have nothing to do with reality. The reality is Smith is not a higher than normal injury risk. He is fully capable of doing what he's been doing on a per game basis and doing it even better. I'll say one last very quick thing, which is that he missed most of the fourth quarter of one of those games that he played. And in that game, he had 7 catches, 80 yards, and a touchdown. He had 3 straight catches early in the fourth quarter. And then I think he was knocked out at that point. He only played in 3/4 of the offensive snaps that game. But that could have padded his stats further. There's a lot of things that the market doesn't pick up on. And that's why we talk about this stuff. It's because if you're just looking at his pure stats from last year, 68 catches, 880 yards or whatever, and you think, top 25 maybe, that's the wrong way to look at it. And so just keep focusing on, instead of pure stats, look at per game. Instead of a depth chart in a vacuum, look at how close the number 2 is to the number 1. Whether they're ascending, whether the number 1 is descending. Brown is not descending yet, but in this case, Dallas Goedert at 30 years old is probably not going to be having a career year. There is so much of an opening, and my prediction is for Smith to get about 85 catches, about 1,250 yards, and about 9 scores. And we'll see how it works out. I'm BJ Rudell, Fantasy Football for Winners. Follow me on the blog. Email me anytime. Sign up for the rankings. All of the above. See you tomorrow.